Hackers of Reddit, what are some cool screwy things about our technology that aren't necessarily public knowledge? Serious. Edit. Wow. I am going to be really paranoid now that I have gained the attention of all of you people. Almost all industry computers think controllers for huge factories, power plants, water reclamation, distance heating, etc. have well-known default passwords or even hard-coded admin accounts. Back in the day, this was not a huge problem because you would run them on private networks with no connection to the internet. Nowadays, the internet is available everywhere and much cheaper than private networks, so many of these industry computers are now reachable from the internet. People that know what they are doing would only make them accessible over a VPN, but there is a very large number of people that shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a keyboard. A lot of this happens because the things are running real-time OSs that prioritize data I/O speeds over security. A standard computer is a time-shared OS, which means there is a non-deterministic amount of time between an interrupt happening on the chip level and the correct program receiving the data. Writing a secure real Timius is really hard, and only one company to date has succeeded, and they sold themselves off to BlackBerry QNX. It's nice to go on and on about system security, but sometimes is just impossible. And air gap is all you can have in some situations. Source: I write code for a lot of these things for a living. I had this discussion once on Hacker News. If you would like to read it, here is the link. The fact that wind turbines and power stations are publicly accessible. Shodan is a fairly scary company in general. You can have the strongest ID system in the world. You can spend billions on software-hardware protection, but if I can ring the new employee called Kathy and say, "Hey, Kathy, you're new here, right? Yeah, it's John from ID Security. There's been a breach and I need sysadmin password quickly so I can patch it up." "Okay," says Kathy, under stress to fix the problem. And there I have it. I got the password. It's called social engineering, and 9 times out of 10 that's how people hack accounts. I worked at a hospital corporate office, and right after 3 weeks of training, I get to go to my actual department for my first real day. Confident I know all the computer systems now. Day 2. I get called to the security office because apparently someone using my login and password accessed 2 systems in the training center after I clocked out. So, I changed all my passwords and entered my passwords on the fucking shared drive because that's the stupid fucking rule, and went to work. Days 3 and 4 were a repeat of day 2. Day 5, they decided to install secret cameras and caught an IT employee sneaking into the training center after accessing my new passwords on the shared drive daily, trying to figure out how to edit an account of a family member to change it to stop a lawsuit. I was chosen because I was new and the only new person with editing power over all systems. We were required to keep our passwords in an unprotected Excel document that only ID and management, and of course myself, would only ever go into if necessary. After that, I kept it updated with fake passwords. We were required to keep our passwords in an unprotected Excel document. That's not even social engineering. That's just people being completely incompetent. People's incompetency is the two-way of getting into systems. By the way, those browser warnings about untrusted SSL certificates that everyone automatically bypasses could be an indicator that you're a victim of a man-in-the-middle attack. In other words, your data is being routed through an attacker's system, possibly through an ARP or DNS spoofing attack. By bypassing the warning messages, you have possibly just agreed to trust an attacker-supplied self-signed SSL certificate. This isn't the case 100 of the time, but def a reason to pause and scrutinize the warning. Nearly every single Comcast router I've ever tested is vulnerable to a WPS Wi-Fi protected setup authorization bypass vulnerability. Disable WPS to protect yourself against it. I.e., any asshole can join your WPA2 protected Wi-Fi network in 10 hours or less with zero knowledge of your passphrase. Many office buildings have secure areas that require an ID badge for ingress access. However, when exiting said secure area, a proximity sensor detects the presence of a person on the secure side and unlocks the door without requiring an ID badge. It's possible to abuse the behavior of the proximity sensor on the secure side of the door using a can of compressed air, effectively bypassing the need to have a valid ID badge. Hold the can of compressed air upside down, place nozzle between door cracks. Aim toward the ceiling toward the location of the proximity sensor on opposite side of the door, pull trigger to spray. If the proximity sensor is improperly configured, The door will open as though a person was on the opposite side exiting the secure area. There is a story on Rydell's Frumtic subgroup about that door technique, except the pen tester pissed underneath the door with a light on the urine. This was also used on a multi-million-dollar server room, so the tester almost ruined some hardware too. That's flipping hilarious. I'm not sure my clients would appreciate me pissing on their doors as a proof of concept though. Haha. I read up on WPS just recently. Everyone should have it disabled. It is fundamentally flawed. It's an 8-digit code, with the last digit as a checksum, and it allows you to authenticate the two halves separately. This means that you can guess the correct password in no more than 11,000 attempts, which is not very large at all. Is there a way to evaluate whether the untrusted SSL certificate is a sign of trouble? There is an option to view the certificate presented by the server you've connected to when your browser gives you that huge scary warning about the certificate error. Unless you are expecting this error for some rare reason, do not enter login credentials after you bravely ignored the warning. It's huge and red and scary for a reason. Some common reasons are: the URL you entered does not match the server name EX. You entered gale.google.com and the server you connected to identifies itself as freevirus.lol.com. This is an obvious man-in-the-middle attack. The certificate has expired EX. It's 41,514 and the cert expired 41,414 and the site admin forgot to renew. This one is more common for smaller websites, but it won't happen for yahoo.com or it would be in the news. The certificate been revoked by the certificate issuer. This is the big one in the Heartbleed era of the internet now. Every reputable website affected by Heartbleed will be revoking the certs they had before patching and reissuing new ones for after they've patched their systems. If their old cert was stolen using the Heartbleed bug, you will get a cert warning if someone is trying to impersonate their site using their revoked certificate. For example, Jimmy Asshole is an Uber hacker and was able to use the Heartbleed bug to steal the private key of the cert issued to Grandpa's local ISP for their webmail prior to it being patched. Your grandpa's computer has some annoying malware which redirects his DNS queries to ad sites but just deals with it because his grandkids avoid fixing his computer for him because he smells funny. Anyway, the Uber hacker gets in touch with the scammer who's making money on these ad-laden sites your grandpa is visiting every time he opens Internet Explorer. Jimmy says to the scammer, "Hey, when people you've infected go to have the DNS point to my server at this IP address XXXX and throw him 1,000 or something like that." Grandpa loads up webmail.locallisp.com into his old computer. He now connects to Jimmy's fake webmail login page for his ISP, and one of two things happen. If the ISP has revoked their old cert from all this Heartbleed hoopla, Grandpa's browser will show him the big red warning saying, "Hey, this certificate has been revoked. Something's fishy." Grandpa may just ignore this error and type his login credentials into Jimmy's honeypot he's connected to. Now Jimmy has Grandpa's login credentials and he can use it to connect to the real ISP's webmail as Grandpa. Poor Grandpa. The local small-time ISP has one sysadmin who's on vacation in the middle of nowhere for the last 2 weeks and they have not revoked the cert on their vulnerable webmail platform. This is the stealth man in the middle attack. Grandpa gets no error and therefore no indication he is connected to Jimmy's web server and not his ISP's because Jimmy's web server is giving his browser the legitimate certificate which he has stolen. Jimmy's web server tells Grandpa, "Hey, I'm webmail.locallisp.com. You can trust me. I'm verified by a third party. Give me your credentials. Everything is kosher." Grandpa, bless his feeble heart, is screwed here. So now Grandpa's email account is compromised. From here, some people may say, "Well, whatever. It's just an email account, not a bank, or anything important like that. Let them read my spam and exchange of cookie recipes with Grandma." From here, Jimmy can nearly destroy a person's life if he wanted to. The possibilities when it comes to access to a person's main email account are huge. 99 of every other website's passwords can be reset with access to your email. Jimmy doesn't even need to steal those login credentials. He'll just reset them. He can email everyone in your contacts who has an email account at LocalISP and have them log into his fake webmail server and harvest all of their email account credentials. He can pretend to be you and email your work ID department and ask them to reset your work computer logon credentials. The new guy working help desk might be dumb enough to do it and email him back the new password. He can post on your Facebook page bomb threats. He can tweet as you that you're about to go shoot up your kid's school. He can use this as a jumping point to get more data about you in order to social engineer, i.e., talk people into doing things they probably shouldn't. He can blackmail grandpa. Old people don't like to be embarrassed, so grandpa may not say anything to anyone about it. He'll just send some money to Jimmy so his kids don't take away his checkbook since he can't be trusted with a computer. How can he be trusted with his own money? This is just one example, but basically Heartbleed is a big deal, and these computers we use every day, all day, know a shitload of information about us and control a lot of our lives whether we like it or not. The internet is a dangerous, dirty place, and software cannot be 100% secure. Clicking ignore on that cert error may only take a split second, but could cost you months or years of cleanup if your identity is compromised online. Don't ignore warning messages on your computers. Don't use the same shitty password on every website. Don't take your digital persona for granted and that you have nothing you wouldn't mind being made public. Do use two-factor authentication wherever possible. TLDR, we're all fucked when it comes to information security at this rate. Proper fucked. I'm joking, kind of. To OP. I'm sorry that this is so long, but it just came out. I think it still answers your question though. Edit, list of sites that offer two-factor authentication. Having two-factor authentication enabled on your accounts where possible makes a stolen username and password combo a lot less useful for a hacker because they need access to something you physically have as well, i.e. your phone token, something like that. There are a few things you can do, especially if you're using a major site such as Facebook or Google that should have a valid certificate. When you see this warning message, there is always going to be an option to view the certificate properties. Or at the very least, it will tell you why the certificate was untrusted. Issue or not trusted. This means that the certificate was signed by an untrusted certificate authority (CA) and could be an indicator of a man-in-the-middle attack. This is something you will sometimes see in an internal or office network, as the company may have an internal CA that is internally trusted, but not trusted on a more macro internet scale, i.e. by your browser. In a corporate network setting, this warning is typically due to the use of an egress HTTP proxy to access the internet. Your company's proxy is effectively man-in-the-middling your SSL connection. Self-signed certificate. The issuer attacker generated an SSL certificate and signed it himself. These are not to be trusted. Certificate is expired. Certificates have a finite lifespan, and an expired cert is designated as untrustworthy by the browser, even if it was signed by a trusted CA. Generally, this is not an indicator of a malicious attack on your connection, more like a lazy site administrator. Any router using WEP is insecure. Source, using neighbor's Wi-Fi. Edit, I used a program called AircrackNG to do it. Tutorials are available online. It took about 8 hours. Edit 2, it took about 8 hours because I had a sucky connection to the router. There was almost no activity on it, and I tried for like 4 hours to try to make it go faster. Your mileage may vary. Edit 3, to y'all talking about legal repercussions, I did some more snooping and found an unsecured network that was not broadcasting the SID. Using that now. Any router with WPS is insecure. Good thing that it can be disabled. Oh wait. This form of attack is less effective these days. It just tries to brute force the 8-digit WPS code. This isn't that difficult if you had an unlimited amount of attempts. The problem is that most modern last 2 years routers will let you have 10 or so attempts then block any WPS access for an hour. Still, many people continue to use outdated routers. It's very simple. Check your router model and see if people have accessed it via Riva or other software. Buy a new one if they have. A firmware update may only be needed, however. Every single network maintains something called an ARP table. ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. It's basically a table that matches an internal IP address assigned by your router to each local machine to a MAC addresser hardwired ID for every network card on a device, so it knows what machine gets what data. The super scary thing about this is, it is 100% entirely unsecured on nearly every local network. Anyone can write ARP data, even the data for other machines, which means I can tell every single device on the network that my MAC address, and therefore my machine, is the router, which means all data on the network will come to my laptop. Before my laptop sends it to the router, I see literally every piece of data sent or received by every computer in the network. Not only do I see the data, but I can edit it on the fly. I can enact a DNS spoof, assign myself as the DNS server for the network, and decide which domain names go to which IP. You search and maybe I send the data to ..biggiantblackdicks.com, or maybe even worse. I set up my laptop as a web server with a fake Facebook page and redirect all domain names to my IP. Instead of logging into Facebook, you just willingly give me your account credentials. Not only is all of this possible, it's really easy. Script kiddie shit, automated entirely. Public Wi-Fi is extremely insecure for pretty much everything. In fact, it doesn't matter if it's a public network at all. Anyone on nearly any network can do this. Professional hacker penetration tester here. I would say the scariest thing I run into on a daily basis is how shoddy, in the security sense, most of the code out there is. I deal mainly with web applications, and it's amazing some of the things the developers come up with. It might be super fast and functional, but horrible security-wise. The number of big development firms that have no security cycle or QA cooked into their DEV cycle is astonishing. The second is just how little understanding in the general public there is about how tech actually works, what it's doing. Everyone uses it for everything. Yet there are people out there that are in charge of commerce, apps that take your financial data, that don't know what a web browser is. I actually think the general population is getting more tech illiterate. As devices have become more user-friendly, the level of ID knowledge required to use them has gone down dramatically. So what we have now is the equivalent of a bunch of toddlers running around with bazookas and not knowing what makes them go boom. As someone who is semi-tech literate, where would you suggest I start to learn more? Edit, thanks for the replies. For non-professionals, Wikipedia is fine for getting the general basics of a topic, but I assume you use the web almost every day, so that's a good place to start. It's all just machines talking to machines using a stack of different technologies. Learn how your browser works. Learn what happens when you click that login button on a website. Learn what makes SSL the secure protocol and what its shortcomings are. Non-network-ish, learn the basics of your PC. Learn the major components, what they do, how they interact. Learn your OS. Learn about how your OS talks to hardware through drivers. You don't need to be reading assembly, but I think everyone should have a basic idea of how it all works. Kinda like how you have a basic idea of how your car works. You might not be a mechanic, but you know it takes fuel and air, and there is combustion in the engine which turns a driveshaft that connects to the wheels via a transmission that controls the speed and direction of spin. The basics. Computers shouldn't be a magic box, and the internet shouldn't be this magical place where everything just is. Most hacked account, be it Facebook, mail or other, aren't done by elite nerd typing quickly on a console, but by malicious people who have basic knowledge of computer and exploit other people's stupidity, or by gathering some information. Example, lost password secret question, what's your favorite food? Most of the time it's pizza. You mean hacker typer doesn't make me a hacker? It totally does. Now go scare some old people. The internet is built on trust. Physical storage doesn't last for as long as people think. CDs and DVDs have a finite lifespan. If you have photos backed up on a disc in the attic from the 90s, they could potentially fail if you ever wanted what was on them. Same thing with USB flash drives and HDDs a decade or two before they fail. This isn't a problem right now, but imagine a world where everything is stored digitally as opposed to hard copy, which also has a finite lifespan. Your grandkids won't have any of your pictures or files because they will all be gone. Sure, you could do online backups, but even then, how long will that service be around? How many times has a company gone out of business, taking its media with them? Edit, to make myself clearer, of course, Google can keep RAID arrays in different locations around the world and replace failing drives. Yes, you can keep your data online, but an online backup is still stored on physical media. Where will that company be in 100 years? I just back it up to the cloud. Even if Apple outlive me, one day they will notice that my cloud backups haven't been touched in 10 years, and they will quietly delete it. A lot of people think that the web is a permanent archive of human history. It is up to a point, but ultimately all data needs to be moved into newer storage to keep it alive. At some point, a form of natural selection will take place, and all of those status updates and photos you made on Facebook and Twitter will be deleted because they're just not worth keeping anymore. Obama's Twitter feed will live for 500 years in some future form of Wikipedia, but yours will be gone before your grandchildren are buried. Funny story about finding old CDs. I bought my first Burner 24X, blazing fast for 200 bones back in the day, lol, when I was 10, and burned a ton of audio CDs on these crappy Memorex black CDRs. Found my old CD booklet 14 years later, popped the disc in my desktop, and they had all turned back into CDRs. Maybe you loaded your CD booklet with all the blanks you originally bought. Oh, lol. They were all burnt audio CDs, tons of writing and scribbles all over them. They used to be full of Disturbed, Korn and System of a Down songs, but not anymore. And aren't those online backup places just another hard drive in the end? How often do they swap those out? Yes and no. They have what's called redundancy, or at least they do if they're worth anything at all as a backup company. You send them your files, they copy them onto a HDD, and that HDD is copied over to at least one other one on a schedule. This ensures that, unless all of their HDDs are in one building and that one building goes up in flames, they'll have a copy of your stuff somewhere in the case that something goes wrong with the HDD they originally put your stuff on. Depends on the company and how good the HDDs are. Serious backer-uppers will use tape backups, which are almost exactly what they sound like, tapes. They last fucking ages. It's usually easier to get information from a person than a computer. All you have to do is find the right way to ask. The fact that a good number of security holes and spying methods that were around 20 years ago are still vulnerabilities and are around today. To put it in the simplest but not 100 accurate terms, there is little to no meaning in the word privacy when you go online. If I can find it, I'll post the link to a video that really dives into this topic. Edit, here is the video. Heads up, it's almost 3 hours long. Appliances or devices ovens, fridges, thermostats, door locks. What the hell? That are network accessible when they normally are not, is a problem that is getting worse. The protocols they use to communicate usually have little to no security in mind. The communication API will probably have really powerful functions available in the open and clear. Example, if I have to upgrade the software of my fridge and there is a command used in there to turn off the power, can I just send that command to any fridge of that brand and have it shut off? Giving up security for convenience is always a hard trade for people like me. Sure, being able to set my thermostat from my phone is neat, but do I have to have it talk through a third party? The company that makes it? No way, and no thanks. Stop buying dumb devices that can remotely be accessed unless you are very sure it won't burn down your house or cost you tons of money in case of an exploit. All you need is one common unique identifier to merge two databases containing potentially millions of records about millions of people. There is a huge black market for databases. Hackers steal databases and put them on BitTorrent. Companies go out of business often. The most valuable asset during liquidation is the customer database. There are companies, agencies and individuals who collect and merge databases in order to harvest marketing info or simply sell access to it as a service. Almost every time you hear about a data breach and you are asked to change your password, it's likely that all other information you sent to that company is also in the hands of somebody untrustworthy. Companies often encrypt or salt their password fields. They don't protect user data in the same way as it's not practical for them to do so. The other meaning of the cloud is when a company asks you to do something that would be normally done on your local PC on their server. This is a bad fucking thing. What they have done is renamed centralized computing common in the 1970s, where you had to ask an authority for permission to run code, and were only allowed to do what you wanted after receiving approval. This architecture is inherently authoritarian and undermines the power of the user. When Adobe moves Photoshop to the Creative Cloud, they are asking you to trust them to store all your work in progress. If these companies go out of business, or if they upgrade the software, or choose to double the price, you are fucked. You lose access to all your previous work. You can't export or save your files, and you are sharing your files with a third party. Same goes for Dropbox, Office 365, Google Docs, but even things we take for granted. Web-based email. If webmail services were secure, why do businesses individually pay for expensive mail servers, software, and maintenance? If you post a naked picture to GoneWorld and use the same camera to post pictures to Facebook, pervs, companies, and intelligence agencies can track you by the metadata. It seems like 95% of all images on Reddit are hosted on Imgur. And Imgur strips all metadata from uploaded images. So as long as you upload to Imgur, no one can track you using metadata. After reading through some of the comments, I would love a blank slate for my online presence. Back to square one and start anew with all the knowledge I've acquired over the years online. I know my tardiness in respects to protecting myself is going to bite me back one day. I've been doing computer security for 10 years and IT for 20. About 40 of the IT infrastructure attached to the internet is unmanaged, meaning that either nobody is taking care of it or whoever is supposed to doesn't actually understand how. I know I'm a little late to the show here, and it'll get buried, but I'll throw my 2 cents Canadian in the mix. Professional security assessment engineer here, and the scariest things that keep me up at night fall into 2 categories. The amount of security theater perpetrated upon the general public without any backlash towards those that are using it to gain power over the people. There have been several instances, like the Patriot Act and pretty much all of the security at the airport after 9/11, where professionals have proclaimed how shitty these policies are and no one believes them. Side note, if you want to see real security, try flying in or out of Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. There are guards outside with rifles and will not hesitate to shoot. Then the security guards at the counter have been trained to ask questions about your stay, where you'll be staying, etc. They will then verify your answers with the hotel or friends you're staying with. Should I change my password? There is a TEDx talk of a hacker showing you what he can do quite easily. Seems like someone hacked this video. Hey, an Ask Reddit thread that I can actually contribute to. Sweet. I'm a grad student studying cybersecurity. People have hacked cars and most other forms of transportation. These hacks have included the ability to stop your brakes from working and moving your steering wheel. While the knowledge is currently held by a small group of people, it never stays that way, and I predict that murder by hacking trolls will be old news before 2020. If the GPS system were to ever fail, just like GLONASS did, the economic damage would easily be in the 100s of billions, as financial institutions depend on GPS for timing. Note that this technology was developed 19 years ago based on a 41-year-old theory. One MIS-programmed counter could bring it all down if it wasn't caught. Everything from power plants to dams to oil pipelines still uses SCADA, a protocol developed with 1990 Second-Zero security practices. These systems are connected to the internet. One worm on the scale of Illaveo built to target these systems would have wide-reaching real-world consequences, including cutting off municipal water supplies. While bug bounty programs are a step in the right direction, from an economic perspective, it is orders of magnitude more profitable to sell a zero-day vulnerability on the black market than it is to sell to a company. This means that most software 0 days are being sold and hoarded instead of patched. In practical terms, this means that almost all of the software you use is vulnerable. Taking all of those things together gets us the scariest part of the picture. In the next decade, I predict that there will be a cyber war or a terrorist attack over the internet. People will die and the economic damage will be equal to, if not greater than, a bombing of a major city. This will provoke a backlash that will fundamentally rewrite the way that we interact with our computers. I cannot even hazard a guess as to what direction that will take, but if Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is anything to go by, it will not be pretty. There are open source programs out there that let you build your own software-defined radio. People use them to listen in on satellite communication. CubeSats are almost economically viable for the average person to build and launch one. This means that we could soon see high school science projects that involve launching something into space and talking to it. Think about that for a moment. It's only been 57 years since mankind first put something into orbit, and we have mastered the technology to the point that it is possible for hobbyists to get involved. There are people alive right now who are older than spaceflight. Access to supercomputers is becoming easier and easier. This is changing the face of everything from engineering to art. Soon people will be able to access more computation power than their brain could ever match and use that to create stuff. RePrap exists as a wiki for open source 3D printers made out of mostly 3D printer parts. While bug bounty programs are a step in the right direction, from an economic perspective, it is orders of magnitude more profitable to sell a zero-day vulnerability on the black market than it is to sell to a company. This means that most software 0 days are being sold and hoarded instead of patched. In practical terms, this means that almost all of the software you use is vulnerable. Shit, that makes sense. It's almost like everything is just waiting to be fucked at any given moment. And it's all on the timetable of the cyber terrorist. In the next decade, I predict that there will be a cyber war or a terrorist attack over the internet. People will die and the economic damage will be equal to, if not greater than, a bombing of a major city. Just curious, how do you predict people will be killed? I'm just not quite understanding the logistics here. The scary part of the computer security world is not China, Russia, or any other type of advanced persistent threat, not anonymous or some disparate group of computer hackers. The number one threat to computer security is people. Social engineering is still the best way to get into almost any system. It cannot be patched. The amount of people who will still run Excel report not a virus, exe, is mind-boggling. Most intrusions are done through malicious emails or malware preloaded onto a USB stick that someone drops somewhere. After having several calls between my banks, PayPal, and Amazon this week while having credit card troubles, I am slightly frightened by how easy it was to talk to them and get them to do things for me and prove who I was. Yes, I wasn't doing anything illegal or even close. I'm just saying it was easy to prove who I was just by calling. Social engineering is definitely the scariest part of the equation. I was at a client's home this weekend just doing some generic cleanup of their computer when the phone rings. Her husband answered, and as I was working, I hear, "My computer's doing what? So what website do I need to go to? And you're from Microsoft?" Had I not been there, it would have been a much bigger mess to clean up. All that stuff that Edward Snowden has leaked, most IT people have known about it for years. It's just that nobody believed us. Edit, Edward, not Richard Lowell. I specifically remember a front page cover article in On Wired magazine about the US government building a massive secret data facility in the middle of the Utah desert for the sole purpose of storing people's phone calls and data. I remember them saying something along the lines of asking for their phone call that they made a couple of weeks earlier, and the facility managers not denying that they had it, but just saying, "We won't give it to you." TLDR version is no one is safe online no matter what. TLDR, no one is safe. The internet is lava. The funny part is you will see a lot of software or programming related things in here. This is completely discounting hardware hackers. It's been going on a lot longer than you think. From beige boxes to carnivore. Extrapolate that into the future and you get cases like Utah. Now imagine what someone could do with an Arduino unit, or even a computer based on a mini ATX motherboard. Tapping into physical infrastructure isn't as Hollywood-esque as you'd think, like in the Ocean's movies. There are millions of places in this country where hard lines are run through municipal tunnels that can be accessed through a sewer, and nobody would be the wiser. Most of software exploits have to use social engineering of some sort to get someone to install access it, but who does a hacker need to trick to just walk up to the side of your house and splice a tap into your connection? Would you notice it? Or the midway point in the last mile? Food for thought. If they have a Mac, you can trick it into believing there isn't an admin account and allow you to create one with 3 lines of code. If that appeases you. Steps. Restart. Holding down the commands keys until a terminal interface appears. Check the file system by typing fsckfy. Mount the root drive, mount UW. Then this, imvad, Apple setup. After, simply type reboot and create a new administrator account, while keeping all of the old account's files and accessibility, and even allowing you to remove its privileges and circumvent locks if you wish. I know this isn't quite hacking the government, but it is still quite fun. And ridiculously easy considering how many businesses and people run Macs under the pretense of security and safety. Backdoors. Programmers have been putting these things in since the early days of software for numerous reasons. In case they aren't paid, for some illegal purpose down the road, theft, blackmail, etc. What is a backdoor? It is some form of secret access to a program through network, usually. This could be implemented by using a non-standard port, non-standard protocol, but is not limited to such. If the programmer who designed the software doesn't use their backdoor, it would likely go unnoticed until it was accessed. What can you do with a backdoor? Anything and everything. It could give the person using the backdoor complete and utter access to every function the program has. Imagine the person who wrote the software to launch a nuclear warhead. Had that person put a backdoor into that software, rather than requiring the secure launch protocol, this person could use their backdoor to bypass all authorization and be able to fire a nuke while Obama had his thumb up his ass. This is partially why these particular computer systems, among other essential systems, are not networked, but with the number of disgruntled programmers and the amount of software written thus far, you have to consider that a good chunk of all software has some kind of backdoor. TLDR if you disrespect your programmer. They may F you in the back door. None of those reasons are why at all. Usually backdoors are either created for advertisers to use, used for debugging the system. Very rarely are they anything else. I'm a computer scientist with security knowledge, so I am not a hacker per se. There is a decent chance that the US government will break modern encryption as we know it in the next decade. Currently, the government, namely the CIA and NSA, are some of the largest employers of mathematicians. The NSA has one of the largest data centers ever built by man. It is speculated that they are nearing a breakthrough and are getting ready to use it. Modern encryption is based on the fact it is really hard to find the prime factors of a number in a recessional amount of time, but extremely easy to make a large number with prime factors. If a way is found to quickly find prime factors, the whole system is fucked. Quantum computers will do this if they turn out to be possible. Perhaps they are banking on that, or perhaps they found some other way. Honestly, this scares the shit out of me more than anything else. Given their data capacity, they are probably already storing all the encrypted data they can find and waiting for the day they can decrypt it. It's likely that the CIA and NSA are at least a decade ahead of academic research in cryptography. In the mid-70s, IBM submitted an encryption standard to the National Bureau of Standards for encrypting sensitive documents. The NBS scrutinized it, thought it was good, and sent it off to the NSA for comments. The experts at NSA looked at it and recommended some mysterious tweaks that befuddled some of the leading academics at the time. Some of the tweaks, like the shortened key length and S boxes, looked suspiciously like security holes that the NSA could plug into and decrypt messages at will. The Senate reviewed it and deemed it acceptable, and so it served as the encryption standard from then on. In 1990, 15 years after the proposals from NSA, academics published a technique known as differential cryptanalysis to break block ciphers. Turns out that those mysterious recommendations from the NSA back in the 70s were engineering specifically to resist attacks based on differential cryptanalysis. The data encryption standard didn't have any defenses against linear cryptanalysis, however, which was discovered 2 years later. One must imagine that the NSA most likely knew about the technique in the early 80s as well. This puts the NSA at about a 15-year advance over the academic community, so I wouldn't be surprised if the NSA has currently discovered new techniques that won't be publicly known until 2030. Any DEFCON video a lot are available on YouTube. GPS can be spoofed faked. You can override the GPS signal with hardware of 1000. This can be used to move the position of a GPS receiver to something else, like say, an airplane is 1000 feet higher than it actually is. Combine this with an autopilot and a bye-bye-plane. This can also be used with boats. Air traffic control can be spoofed too. With 1500 of equipment you can create your own virtual airplane on the screens at an airport. Create 10 fake airplanes and you will have a Where is Waldo game with planes. You can even make them crash. Even autopilot will react to avoid crashing into the ghosts. Let's just say that I'm very happy I don't have to fly often and there are enough planes that I'm unlikely to be on one specific airplane. Source: alright, what have you done with MH370? This can be used to move the position of a GPS receiver to something else. Like say, an airplane is 1000 feet higher than it actually is. This can also be used with boats. Captain, the boat is 1000 feet in the air. What do we do? Sorry, but you are not going to spoof autopilot with a GPS scrambler. Airliners fly on very specific vectors that are verified periodically with VORs. At best, you can annoy the pilots and force them to not autoland. Moreover, autopilot relies on airspeed, pitot, gyro, and compass to maintain a heading. No way you're going to screw with those. Sorry dude, altitude information from GPS receivers is not used for aircraft instruments. It may be shown on the GPS receiver, but pilots don't use this as a reliable source of altitude information. We have much better altimeters for that. Till I want to be a yak farmer. There's lots of negativity in this thread and it isn't unwarranted, but I'll try to add something positive. If you can generate 256 bits of random data, which would look something like this:
532A6F24174at2B55C103921EBF7FD3377467457CDB560882,
call it a key,
and give it to a friend so that nobody knows the key except you and your friend, then you can talk to each other in complete secrecy, no matter where you are on Earth, as long as you have an internet connection and your communication devices are kept secure. Nobody can see what you're saying, not even governments. I think a lot of people think governments can break any encryption because they think of the code breaking that went on during World War I and World War II. In reality, under some plausible mathematical assumptions, properly implemented encryption works. The math works. It's unbreakable. Granted, it's very hard to implement properly. You'll notice I said under some plausible mathematical assumptions in the preceding paragraph. One of the assumptions is called PNP, and if it's false meaning N. Something even more incredible is true: everything that can be quickly checked by a computer can be quickly created by a computer. If N, encryption would be impossible, since a computer can quickly check if it has the right key by trying to decrypt the message with the key and seeing if it makes sense, so it could also quickly find the key. But even more, computers would be able to prove any mathematical statement that's true, and as a proof, because computers are very fast at checking proofs, there'd be no more need for human mathematicians. Want to know whether Goldbach's conjecture is true or not? Just stick it into a computer program and it'll tell you. There's lots more. See if you can think of more examples. If we found out that N, it would be nothing short of a revolution. The crazy thing is, we don't actually know if PNP or if N. We strongly suspect that PNP, but we can't seem to prove it. Why did I say true and as a proof? Because in mathematics, there are actually things that are true but can't be proven. Wow. Writing this post reminded me why I'm a computer scientist, even though I have to deal with all of the negativity, insecurity, and incompetence. Was about to post this. TLDR, all of modern software encryption is based on a mathematical assumption. If it turns out to be wrong, we're fucked. When you delete a file, it often doesn't really go away. This applies mostly to hard drives, although some other types of rewritable media share this characteristic. Deleting a file on your computer often doesn't physically erase the bits that made it up, but rather causes the computer to simply ignore the data. The best analogy would be to imagine that the computer kept several filing cabinets, along with a separate ledger that indicated which filing cabinets are in use. When a computer wants to delete something, it most often simply removes it from the ledger, leaving it in the cabinet until something else that needs the space comes along. You can often recover deleted files by using simple undelete software. To truly get rid of the files, you must shred the empty space on your drive, which can be done in a variety of ways. The best analogy I've heard is the contents page of a book. When you delete something, it doesn't rip the pages out of the book. Instead, it just removes it from the contents page. The pages are still there, but instructions on finding them are gone.